please, let's give them a big applause to this year's Nobel laureate. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this press conference at the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. My name is Göran Hansson. I'm the Secretary General of the Academy, and with us today are this year's Nobel laureates. Next to me here we find Professor James Peebles, Nobel laureate in physics, cosmologist, and as we say, the master of the universe was his nickname when we made the evaluations. Then we have Dr. Michel and Didier Queloz, the discoverers of foreign planets around in other solar systems. Then we have the chemistry laureates, the inventors of the batteries that are changing the world and the energy supply for the better, Dr. Stanley Whittingham and Dr. Akira Yoshino. Dr. John B. Goodenough, the third Nobel laureate in chemistry, unfortunately cannot be here at the press conference today. He had a long journey and he needs his rest. He's an elderly gentleman, as you may know, the oldest Nobel laureate we've had. In great spirit, but he needs some rest. And then, last but not least, we have the laureates in economic sciences in memory of Alfred Nobel, Dr. Abhijit Banerjee, Dr. Esther Duflo, and Dr. Michel Kremer. And as you know, the panel represents a broad range of expertise at the pinnacle of scientific endeavor. Discoveries they've made are so far-ranging that actually yesterday, the astronauts up at the International Space Station had a conversation with 3 of them. And as it turned out, the astronauts, Jessica Meir and Luca Parmitano, were fascinated about and looking for the exoplanets and based much of their work on lithium-ion batteries. So I think I could say it was a unique experience for all of us who were there and had the opportunity to listen. So yesterday it was the astronauts' opportunity, and now it's yours, ladies and gentlemen of the press. And I'll just leave the floor to you to ask questions to our distinguished panel. Who would like to start? Yes, please. Could you identify yourself first? You'll get a microphone here. I think it's on. Try.
I'm Kohei Watanabe from GG Press Japanese News Agency. Congratulations to all laureates. May I ask questions to Dr. Yoshino and Professor Whittingham? Professor Goodenough is absent today, so have you met and talked with him already?
If you have spoken to Dr. Goodenough, is that the question?
Professor Goodenough is absent today, so Dr. Yoshino or Professor Whittingham, have you met and talked with him?
Yes, I met with Dr. Goodenough at breakfast yesterday. He's in very good spirits and is very excited.
What did he talk to? Please tell me, what did he talk?
We just talked about how well he was doing, not about science.
You know, some of these inventions are still secret because they're working on the new battery technology.
Okay. Okay. Well, one more thing, please. To Dr. Yoshino, please give some message to researchers in private companies.
Okay. I'm a researcher of industry, so it is very difficult to receive a Nobel Prize, especially for the industry researchers. But in this case, I received the Nobel Prize, so this award will encourage the young researcher in industry, I believe.
Thank you very much, sir.
Who's next? The lady over there. You'll get a microphone here, and please identify yourself.
I'm Shravani Vasu. I write for an Indian newspaper, Anand Bazaar. My question is to Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo. You've been You made randomized controlled RCT a buzzword in India ever since you've won this Nobel Prize. Could you tell us whether you want to expand your program there? And this is also for Michel. Would you expand it there, and particularly in West Bengal? Any plans for that?
You know, we mostly respond to demand. So if there is, people want us to do our RCTs, we will, and the policy question is of relevance, we'll do it. It's rarely that we go and actually tell, you know, somebody to sort of adopt a policy and make them do an RCT. It's more, we mostly respond to demand. So I assume and hope that this will create demand and we'll respond to it.
Okay, now we got lots of hands up. I think the gentleman next to you was the next one here, please.
Good morning and congratulations to you all. My question to Professor Banerjee again. Professor Banerjee, when you say economics are mostly like plumbers, people has an expectation if there is a drainage or leakage in the pipeline, a plumber or an economist will arrive with a wrench in your hand. Such a fantastic image you gave in your second book, a wrench. And people think that he will, like a magic wand, he will solve all the problems and solve the leakage of the economy of the country. What do you think about these expectations?
I think you probably never had a plumber. They often don't solve the problem. Or they tell you that you'll have to, you know, dig up your whole house and relay the pipes. And, you know, so I wouldn't be that optimistic.
Yes, the gentleman over there and then the lady next to him, Maria.
I'm from Kyodo News, Japanese news media. I have a question to Mr. Yoshino. Yeah. Tomorrow you have a Nobel lecture. Could you tell me how you are feeling and what you are thinking now?
About the Nobel
lecture に向けて。
Okay. I am prepared for the lecture tomorrow, and I want to send a message to the world concerning about global environment issues. And I want to talk tomorrow my opinion or my vision toward the global environment. So it's my message to the world. Yeah.
And the lectures are open to the public, so you're most welcome, all of you.
I'm Maria Gunther from the Swedish newspaper Dagens Nyheter. I have a question to all the laureates. I would like to know what you donated to the Nobel Prize Museum and why.
Shall we start with Dr. Peebles and then we can go on?
I donated my slide rule, which I purchased as an undergraduate in 1953, and it was my constant companion for computation until 1970, when the miracle of electronics gave me an HP 35 hand calculator. And now, of course, the slide rule, which sat in a desk in my drawer since 1970, is now in the museum. It is covered with the dirt of all those years. And I asked them whether they would clean it off, and they were not sure.
Dr. Bayer.
So Michel Bayer, I've given a small piece of glass used in the first cross-correlation spectrograph developed 40 years ago. It's some kind of strange template used to do the extraction of the Doppler effect in the spectra and to get precise velocities. And 20 years later, this was exactly the same development with new techniques for having a load with a new spectrograph to detect the first planet. So this is a small piece of glass.
Dr. Queloz.
I gave the key of the telescope. I was using for the discovery of the planet. So in these days, I spent a lot of time there, and it gave me the key access to the telescope, which actually was an access to all the telescope on the site of the Observatoire Haute-Provence. So I kept always this as a kind of a souvenir of what had happened, and I thought that was a really good time right now to donate this, this key to the museum.
Please, Dr. Whittingham.
So I managed to find 2 of the original lithium-ion batteries from about 1976. We donated those plus a brochure describing what they were, and they're still active and alive today.
Please.
Okay, I gave the experimental cell. First is a very primitive glass cell of lithium-ion battery in 1983. And the second sample was is a cylindrical lithium battery used for the safety test. And third sample is a prismatic cell used for the cell phone. And the fourth sample is a laminate cell, current laminate cell for smartphone. And also I gave the monthly report in 1983 when I invented the lithium-ion battery.
We did a research project in northern Ghana on whether women who were extremely low income, among the poorest of the poor, can be made more productive by encouraging them. And the way we would measure their productivity was by making them make bags. We paid them to make bags. They made 117,000 bags, so there were a few left, and we donated 2 of the prettier ones to the museum.
We also donated 3 children books, graduated 1, 2, and 3. They are reading books produced by the wonderful organization Pratham, who is also the organization that runs the Teaching at the Right Level program that we have evaluated over the years, and that shows a tremendous improvement in children's ability to read, thanks in particular to materials such as this.
Diarrheal disease is a major killer of children in the developing world, and much of that's caused by unsafe water. So I've donated a water treatment dispenser. This is designed using some principles of behavioral economics, designed to be salient, designed to be public, and very importantly, designed to be free for the user. Which is a repeated finding in all of our work, that making preventive health measures available for free leads to much higher rates of use. This has now been scaled up by the NGO Evidence Action to reach more than 2 million households in Kenya, Uganda, and Malawi.
Great, thank you. Now we have a question from the lady over here, next to me.
Hello. Spanish News Agency, EFE. Climate Summit is underway in Madrid, so I would like to know your opinion about what we can expect from this summit, and do you think that world leaders and the general people are really aware of the emergency of this crisis?
So, the climate summit in Madrid and your comments on that and the expectations. Who would like to start on that answering that interesting question? Dr. Whittingham.
Maybe just a few comments. I think that time is ripe now to help solve the climate change issue, but we have to be pragmatic. It's not going to be easy. We can't just turn off all the CO2 producers. We've got to do things stepwise and have some solutions in mind. I think the lithium battery is going to help electrification of transportation, including big trucks. And clearly in the US, it's already helping solar and wind take over from coal power plants in my own town. They put in a battery storage system, and within 2 months the coal power plant was turned off. So we have to do things stepwise and have a plan in place.
And maybe I can comment on the astrophysics perspective here. Is I've seen a couple of time people mentioning it doesn't matter because anyway we're going to leave the Earth at some point. And I think this is just irresponsible and this is a statement because the stars are so far away. I think we should not really have any hope, serious hope to escape the Earth, and also keeping in mind that, I mean, we are a species that has evolved and specially developed for that planet. We're not built to survive on any other planet than this one. So I think even going to Mars or this place like that, I think it would be tremendously difficult. So we better spend our time and energy trying to fix it than trying to imagine that we're going to leave it and destroy it and leave it.
Thank you.
Maybe we should say something from the economic
Please,
perspective.
yes. Yes, sorry, I didn't hear.
Well, I think from economics, often there is another sort of hope that it will somehow work itself out because renewable energy will become cheap enough that there won't be a need to consume less. We will just fuel our consumption with renewable energy. It would be great if it were the case, but I don't think we can count on it necessarily. So curbing climate change will require a change in behavior as well, in particular in the rich countries, because in the poor countries, the consumption still needs to grow, the economy needs to grow, but in the rich country, people will need to adjust their consumption, and that might mean not just driving cleaner car, but also driving fewer cars. But we also think that this is possible, because we think that the human need for consumption is not that infinite, and we think that people can be taught to understand the importance of these issues for, in particular, the poor people in the world, because climate change will affect disproportionately people who live in the south, because it's already hot, and because there are fewer opportunities to adjust. So in the near future, the warming of the planet could really endanger most of the gains that have been made against poverty worldwide. So this is our responsibility in the rich world to curb our own consumption to avoid this. And we think it's possible because we think that people can understand these issues and can also learn to live with a little less.
Thanks very much. The lady over there.
Good morning, I'm Corina Negra from Radio Romania, and I have 2 questions, if I may. First of all, for Professor Esther Duflo. So you are the second woman with the Nobel Prize in Economics after Elinor Ostrom. So can we say that there is already a trend in choosing women in economics? And what is your explanation about the fact that there are only 2 women? And the second question will be for all economics laureates. Are there new variables that, how to say, appeared meanwhile that would change your theories, that you have to account into your theories? Because, for example, prevention lacks even in some other democratic countries. So prevention is not, how to say, a top politics focus. In some democratic countries too, more developed.
So 2 questions. Let's start with the women in economic sciences.
So I'm proud to follow in the footsteps of Elinor Ostrom, who was also interested in developing countries, not incidentally. I suppose 2 points make a trend. You can draw a line. so I suppose that's... so I think the fact that there are only 2 women in economics so far reflects the fact that there are not enough women in the economics profession in general. And in part that reflects, I think, a little bit the culture of the field, which is somewhat, let's say, in your face, which doesn't necessarily gel with what many women like. And in part, it reflects, I think, the perception that economics is just about finance and making the rich even richer, or, you know, maybe interest rate at best. So one hope with this prize is not only that I'm I'm a woman and part of the laureates, but just the field as well, the fact that economics is also about social issues and issues of poverty. And last year was also talking about climate change, will make a vast number of people aware that economics is an important part of how we live our lives in general, and hopefully encourage other women, also other members of underrepresented minorities to join the field.
And then you had the second question about the economic sciences more generally. Who would like to comment? Michael?
Sure. I didn't catch the second part of your question, but the first, do you want to repeat it?
Yeah, the question was that are there new variables that will affect your theory if you would have to develop your theories now? Because now we are taking into account more than in the beginning of the 90s, the climate change, the migration, so how this would affect your theory. And the second...
okay, I think we'll have to limit it to that.
I'm sorry. So the experimental approach that we've all participated in, I think one of the wonderful things about it is it's exactly about confronting the theories with facts. And then that in turn leads to the development of further theories. So, you know, an early example for me, I taught secondary school in Kenya. I was then involved in evaluating a project that was providing textbooks to students. And I expected that the textbooks would lead to greater learning and greater test scores. And what we found instead was that when we looked on average, we didn't see this. Then that made us go back and think and reflect on our experience from spending time, in my case, I'd been a teacher there, but just from spending time as part of doing the study. And we realized that much of the school system at the time was oriented towards children at the top of the test score distribution. That's where the teachers put their focus. The textbooks were taught in English. That made us develop a new hypothesis that perhaps the textbooks were not as useful as they would have been because they weren't oriented towards the typical student. And we found ways to test that hypothesis. Then in further work, Esther, Abhijit, others found ways to devise new approaches for teaching at the right level that have now reached many millions of people and are helping address those problems. So that's just one example, but time after time we find we know much less than we thought we knew, and that leads us to revise our theories. So at the broadest level, that's exactly what I think this prize is recognizing.
Great, thank you. Let's see the lady over there, then the gentleman there.
Good morning, my name is Linda. I work for the Swedish technology newspaper Ny Teknik. I have a question for Professors Yoshino and Whittingham. I would like to know if you, at the time of your discoveries, could imagine the profound impact you would have on society.
So I think put things maybe in perspective. When I made the invention of lithium battery, I worked for a company, Exxon, one of the largest oil companies, and they were going to be an energy company. Their intent was to build electric vehicles. So they had big intentions. No, my dreams weren't necessarily that big, and clearly this whole area of portable electric power has gone far beyond what we could ever have dreamed. No, you wouldn't have the iPhones, you wouldn't have grid storage. So, no, we had dreams, but they're never as big as what actually happened. So it's been a great, I would say, 50 years.
Okay, I invented the current lithium-ion battery in 1985. At the time, there was no cell phone, there was no laptop, also no smartphone. There's only one big market was the power source for camcorder, video camera. It's only the large market in that time. So I couldn't imagine such a big market at the time.
Thank you. Gentleman over there.
I'm Asahi Shimbun newspaper. I have a question. Mr. Yoshino and Mr. Whittingham. Mr. Yoshino, what do you think about the relationship of your lithium battery research with Mr. Whittingham?
Okay. As you know, the current technology of current lithium batteries is based on the intercalation concept, both positive electrode and also the negative electrode. It's my answer, okay?
How do you think about Mr. Whittingham personally?
Maybe I met Professor Whittingham at the international conference around about 10 years ago, I think.
Mr. Whittingham, the same question. What do you think about the relationship your research with Mr. Yoshino?
It's a long tale and a happy one and some unhappiness to some extent. If you look at the battery research efforts, it's really, I did some work in the US and John Goodenough in the UK, but then all the application work went over to Japan where Dr. Yoshino and his company picked it up. Both Europe and the US weren't willing to invest the money to make it into a commercial product. So we had this great relationship. It worked very, very well.
So we have a couple of more questions, and I noticed that you've been a bit shy to ask our physics laureates questions. Don't feel inhibited, even though it's difficult subjects, it's extremely fascinating. Who would like to ask? Maybe the gentleman over there.
Thank you. My name is Alexei Payevsky. I'm from the Science Russian Media Indicator.ru. My question is to Didier Queloz. Mr. Queloz, I ask you as an acting astronomer, what kind of objects in the fields of exoplanets you expected to discover when the new generation of telescopes like ELT or 30 meters telescopes will be found in some years?
Well, thanks for the question, because I think there is a real revolution. We call that the golden age of astronomy right now, where we are building equipment we had never dreamed 20 years ago. So we are building telescopes which are 4 or 5 times bigger than anything that has been built in the past, which is a massive step. Usually you just do by factor 2, so there is a 40-meter class telescope being built. We're going to fly the biggest ever telescope with the James Webb Space Telescopes. So there's always a rule when you have a new equipment, which is you can plan something, and definitely we know what we're going to get, but the key excitement is what is non-planned. And always when we have what we call a new window on the universe, that is exactly what this kind of big equipment will allow us, we will have a lot of surprises. And I think this is how science works. So I cannot tell you exactly what to expect, but I expect a lot of surprise and excitement and definitely great discoveries, which is big equipment to come.
Thank you. So we're running short of time, but there will be opportunities for individual interviews. But I'd like to use the privilege to ask the last question to our economics laureates. I'm sure you've got the question already. What are you going to do with your money?
As economists, we know money. Actually, I was asked this question on the very first press conference on very little sleep, and I suggested that we were going to try to find the equivalent of Pierre and Marie Curie spending with the money. When Pierre and Marie Curie got the Nobel Prize, they bought 1 gram of radium to further their research. And the 3 of us have been thinking together what is the equivalent of 1 gram of radium. And we have always been saying that this is a prize for a movement. is a prize that is much bigger than us, that rewards the work of hundreds of researchers and, of course, also NGO partners, government partners, etc. And that we were hoping with this prize to nurture this movement as well, and in a sense, give it back. One of the ways this movement was nurtured is through a research fund called the Vice Fund, which has allowed graduate students and junior faculty to finance their research. It's often very difficult for graduate students to find the money that allows them to finance this research. And the Vice Fund, which was started by Andy Weiss with the collaboration of Michel and Abhijit, did that in a very effective way, allowed to fund dozens or more than dozens of research projects that were often absolutely fabulous and where we can see the unexpected and the future of the work. So we decided to put our money together and to give it to the Vice Fund. We were very humbled and gratified by the fact that the Weiss family has decided to follow us in expanding the Weiss Fund through their charitable organization CRI. They will give, on top of in addition to our donation from the Nobel Prize money, they will give an extra $50 million to expand the Weiss Fund so that it will be now accessible to young researchers in Europe, in India, in Africa, and in Latin America. So we think that this could be something absolutely equivalent to the gram of radium in furthering the research of many younger scholars for the next several decades.
Thank you very much. And with that, we close the press conference. There will be opportunities for individual interviews for those who have requested it. And let's finish with an applaud to our laureates. Thank you.